Emma Carter sat on the edge of her bed, her hands gripping her phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded in her chest as she listened to the sounds coming from downstairs. Her mother's voice was weak, pleading. Her stepfather, Rick, was shouting. Again. It had been like this for months. Ever since Rick lost his job, things had gotten worse. At first, it was just yelling. Then things started breaking. Dishes, picture frames, chairs. Now, Emma didn't know what to expect. But something about tonight felt different. The house was dark except for the flickering glow of the streetlight outside. Shadows danced across her bedroom walls as she held her breath, trying to make sense of what was happening below. A loud crash made her jump. Then silence. Emma's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She knew she should call someone. Her best friend, Mia, always told her to tell a teacher or the police. But Emma was scared. What if no one believed her? What if calling made things worse? Then, a sound sent shivers down her spine. Her mother sobbing. Emma had heard her cry before, but this time, it was different. It was broken, terrified. Her stomach twisted into knots. She had to do something. Slowly, she crept toward her bedroom door and pushed it open just an inch. The hallway was dark. The voices were lower now, but she could still hear them. "I told you to stop," her mother said in a shaky voice. "Don't tell me what to do." Rick snapped. His voice was slurred. He had been drinking again. Emma's hands tightened into fists. She couldn't just sit there. She needed help. Her fingers hovered over the screen of her phone. 911. It was so simple. Just 3 numbers. But once she pressed the call button, there was no going back. A sudden noise from downstairs made up her mind. It was the sound of something heavy being knocked over, followed by another cry from her mother. Emma pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice. A woman's calm voice answered. 911. What's your emergency? Emma's voice came out in a whisper. Please help me. My stepdad. He's hurting my mom. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but she forced herself to keep going. The dispatcher asked for her address. She gave it. The woman told her to stay on the line. Downstairs, Rick's voice grew louder. Emma's heart pounded harder. She was terrified, but she knew she had done the right thing. She had no idea that what she was about to tell 911 would shock everyone. Emma pressed the phone to her ear, her heart racing. The 911 dispatcher's voice was calm, but Emma felt anything but calm. "You're doing great," the woman on the line said. "Stay with me. Where is your stepfather now?" Emma swallowed hard. She peeked out her bedroom door again. The hallway was still dark, but she could hear Rick moving around downstairs. His footsteps were heavy, uneven. He was pacing. "He's in the living room," she whispered. "I think he's looking for something." Another loud crash made Emma flinch. Her mother let out a soft cry. Emma gritted her teeth. She hated how scared her mother sounded. "Help is on the way," the dispatcher assured her. "Stay quiet and don't hang up." Emma's fingers were slick with sweat. She squeezed the phone tighter. Then Rick's voice boomed from below. "Emma, get down here. Now." Her breath caught in her throat. He knew she was awake. The dispatcher's voice remained steady. "Don't go downstairs, Emma. Stay where you are. Can you lock your door?" Emma rushed to her bedroom door and turned the lock as quietly as she could. Her hands shook as she backed away. "Okay, I locked it," she whispered. "Good. Just stay put." Downstairs, Rick was still shouting. "Emma, I know you hear me." His voice was rough, like he had been drinking for hours. Emma didn't answer. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to control her breathing. She had never been this scared before. Then her mother spoke. "Leave her alone, Rick." Silence. Then footsteps. Slow, heavy steps coming up the stairs. Emma's stomach twisted in fear. She had to stop him. She had to say something. So she did. "I called 911, she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to be heard. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Even the dispatcher stayed quiet, waiting. Then Rick laughed. It was low and cold. "You did what?" "I called 911, Emma repeated, her voice a little stronger this time. "They're sending the police." More silence. Then, something unexpected happened. Rick turned around and ran. Emma heard his footsteps pounding down the stairs. She rushed to her window and peeked through the blinds just in time to see him shove open the front door and sprint into the night. "He's leaving," she told the dispatcher. "Stay where you are, Emma. Officers are almost there." Emma's body sagged with relief, but she didn't move from her spot. Her mother was still downstairs. She needed to make sure she was okay. Then, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. The police had arrived, but Emma had no idea that what she was about to tell them would change everything. Emma's heart pounded as she watched the police car stop in front of her house. 2 officers stepped out, their faces serious. She could see their dark uniforms glowing under the flashing lights. "Emma, the officers are there," the dispatcher said. "Stay on the line until they come inside." Emma nodded, even though the dispatcher couldn't see her. She was still shaking, but she knew she had done the right thing. She heard a knock on the front door. "Police, open up," one of the officers called out. Emma rushed to her bedroom door and unlocked it. She ran down the stairs, her legs wobbly. Her mother was standing in the living room, her face pale and her hands clutching her arms. The door opened, and the officers stepped inside. One was tall with short brown hair, and the other was slightly shorter with a serious expression. "Are you the one who called 911? The taller officer asked, looking at Emma. She nodded quickly. "Yes. My stepdad. He was hurting my mom. And then he ran away when I told him I called the police." The officers exchanged glances. The shorter officer turned to Emma's mother. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Emma's mother nodded, but her eyes were red, and she looked like she might start crying again. I'm fine now." "Did he hit you?" the officer asked gently. Emma's mother hesitated. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but then she shut it again. Emma stepped forward. "He always scares her," she blurted out. "He breaks things. He yells, and I think he was looking for something tonight. I don't know what, but he was acting really strange." The taller officer frowned. "Looking for something?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, he was searching around like he lost something important." The officer turned back to Emma's mother. "Ma'am, do you know what he was looking for?" Her mother took a deep breath, then let it out shakily. "There's something I haven't told anyone." Emma's stomach clenched. She could tell this was serious. Her mother's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Rick has been hiding something. I found it 2 days ago, and I took it. That's why he was so angry tonight." The officers leaned in slightly. "What did you find?" Emma's mother glanced at her, then looked at the officers again. "I found a small box in his closet. It had a lot of money inside. And something else. A key." Emma's eyes widened. She had no idea about any of this. "A key?" the officer asked. Her mother nodded. "I don't know what it's for, but I was scared. I thought maybe he was doing something illegal, so I hid the box in my room." The officers exchanged another glance. This time, their expressions turned more serious. "Where is the box now?" the taller officer asked. Emma's mother hesitated, then turned and disappeared down the hallway. A few moments later, she came back with a small black box in her hands. The officers took it and opened it. Inside, there was a thick stack of cash, hundreds of dollars in loose bills, and at the bottom of the box, a single silver key. Emma stared at it, confusion twisting in her mind. "What does it open?" she asked softly. The officer studied the key for a moment, then looked up. "We don't know yet," he said, "but we're going to find out." Emma had no idea that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Emma stared at the silver key in the officer's hand. It looked ordinary, small, with a simple design, but she could feel that it was important. Her stepfather had been searching for it, desperate to find it. The taller officer, whose name tag read Officer Blake, turned to Emma's mother. "You said you found this in Rick's closet." She nodded. "Yes, hidden under some old clothes." Officer Blake exchanged a look with his partner. "Do you have any idea what the key might open?" Emma's mother shook her head. "I don't know. But when I found it, I had a bad feeling. That's why I hid it." Emma shivered. Her stepfather had always been unpredictable, but this was different. Why did he have a hidden box of cash and a key? What was he involved in? The second officer, Officer Grant, pulled out a small notepad and started writing. "We'll need to check if Rick has any storage units, safe deposit boxes, or anything that could require this key. In the meantime, we should talk about where you and Emma will stay tonight." Emma's mother looked around the house nervously. "You think he'll come back?" Officer Blake sighed. "We can't be sure, but people don't just leave behind large amounts of cash unless they have no choice. If Rick comes back for it, he could be dangerous." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't want to stay here. Not if there was a chance Rick would return. "We can go to my sister's house," her mother said quickly. "It's not far from here." Officer Grant nodded. "That's a good idea. We'll have a patrol car keep an eye on the house tonight." Emma felt some relief, but her mind was still spinning. What had Rick done? What was he hiding? A late-night escape? Emma and her mother packed their bags quickly. Emma grabbed her school books, some clothes, and her phone charger. Her hands still felt shaky as she stuffed things into her backpack. "Come on, sweetie," her mother said, her voice tight with worry. "Let's go." The police escorted them outside. Emma shivered as the cool night air hit her skin. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars made everything feel unreal. As they walked toward their car, Emma's eyes drifted toward the dark street. She felt like someone was watching them. She turned to Officer Blake. "What if Rick is still nearby?" He gave her a reassuring nod. "We'll find him. You did the right thing by calling us tonight." Emma wanted to believe that, but she still had a bad feeling. Her mother started the car, and they drove off into the night. Emma kept looking out the window, searching for any sign of Rick, but the streets were empty. For now. A shocking discovery. They arrived at her aunt's house a little after midnight. Emma's Aunt Lisa welcomed them in with worried eyes. "What happened?" she asked. Emma's mother shook her head. "It's a long story." Lisa hugged them both. "You're safe here. That's what matters." As Emma settled into the guest room, she couldn't stop thinking about the key. She pulled out her phone and started searching. What could a small silver key open? Storage units, lock boxes, safe deposit boxes, even hidden compartments in houses. Her stomach twisted. Her stepfather had been acting more and more paranoid lately. What if he wasn't just an angry drunk? What if he was hiding something much worse? Emma lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The guest room at Aunt Lisa's house was quiet, but her mind was racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the key. What did it open? What had Rick been hiding? She picked up her phone and searched again. What does a small silver key usually unlock? The results were all the same: lockers, storage units, deposit boxes. She frowned. Could Rick have a secret place where he kept things hidden? A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Emma." Her mother's voice was quiet. Emma sat up. "Yeah." Her mother walked in, looking tired. She sat on the edge of the bed. "Are you okay?" Emma hesitated, then shook her head. "No. I keep thinking about that key." Her mother sighed. "Me too." She glanced at the small black box sitting on the nightstand. "I don't understand why he had all that money. And what if that key opened something really bad?" Emma bit her lip. "Do you think Rick is in trouble?" Her mother didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "I think he's done something he shouldn't have." Emma shivered. She had always known Rick was a mean drunk, but what if he was something worse? The missing stepdad. The next morning, Officer Blake called. "We haven't found Rick yet," he said. "We checked his usual places, but no one has seen him." Emma sat at the kitchen table, listening as her mother talked on the phone. Aunt Lisa made coffee, her expression worried. "Do you think he left town?" Emma asked when her mom hung up. Her mother shook her head. "I don't know, but he wouldn't just leave his money behind unless he was really scared." Emma's stomach twisted. Rick had been angry last night, but when she told him she called 911, he had run. Why? Aunt Lisa sat down. "Maybe that key is the answer. If you find what it opens, you'll find out what Rick is hiding." Emma nodded. "But how do we do that?" Her mother thought for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. "I'm going to call the bank. If Rick has a safe deposit box, maybe we can figure something out." Emma held her breath as her mom spoke with the bank. After a few minutes, she hung up, her face pale. "He does have a safe deposit box," she said slowly. "And I think this key might open it. The secret inside the bank." An hour later, they were at the bank. Officer Blake had met them there, just in case. A bank worker led them into a quiet back room. She looked at Emma's mom. "Do you have authorization to access this box?" Her mother hesitated. "I'm his wife." The woman frowned. "Without his permission, we can't let you open it." Officer Blake stepped forward. "We have reason to believe this box contains something important to an ongoing case." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let me get the manager." Emma's hands were sweating. What would they find inside? A few minutes later, the bank manager arrived. He looked serious. "Are you sure you want to open this?" he asked Emma's mother. She nodded. The bank worker led them to a small metal box inside a locked cabinet. Her mother pulled the silver key from her purse, her hands shaking. She slid it into the lock and turned it. The box clicked open. Emma held her breath as her mother slowly lifted the lid. Inside, there were stacks of money, even more than in the first box. But that wasn't all. There was also a small brown envelope. Her mother picked it up and opened it. Her hands trembled as she pulled out several pieces of paper. She gasped. "What is it?" Emma asked, her heart pounding. Her mother turned to Officer Blake, her face pale. "It's proof," she whispered. "Proof that Rick has been lying to all of us." Emma's head spun. She had no idea what the papers said, but one thing was clear. They had just uncovered something big. Emma watched as her mother's hands shook while holding the papers. Officer Blake gently took them from her and began reading. His expression changed from curiosity to something more serious. "What does it say?" Emma asked, her heart pounding. Officer Blake let out a slow breath. "These are documents. Fake documents." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked up. "It looks like Rick has been using a different name. These papers show multiple fake identities, bank accounts, and large money transfers." Emma's mother gasped. "Fake identities." Officer Blake nodded. "It seems like Rick has been living a double life." Emma's head spun. But why? What was he doing? Officer Blake flipped through the documents. Some of these accounts show large deposits of cash from unknown sources. It's possible he was involved in something illegal, fraud, money laundering, or worse. Emma felt sick. She had always thought of Rick as mean and angry, but she had never imagined he was a criminal. Her mother covered her mouth with her hand. "I've been married to him for years, and I never knew." The bank worker looked nervous. "Should we call the police?" she asked Officer Blake. "I am the police," he said firmly. "And yes, this just became a serious case." He turned back to Emma's mother. "We need to take these documents to the station. This is evidence." Emma's mother nodded slowly. "Take whatever you need." A dangerous man on the run. As they left the bank, Emma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her chest. Rick had been hiding a lot. If he was involved in something criminal, did that mean dangerous people were looking for him? She turned to Officer Blake as they walked to the car. If Rick ran away last night, where do you think he went? Blake sighed. We're trying to figure that out, but one thing is clear. He's in trouble. And now that we have these documents, he'll do anything to get them back. Emma shivered. Would he come after them? Her mother seemed to have the same thought. Are we safe? She asked. Blake hesitated for a second before answering. We'll put extra patrols near your sister's house. But if Rick realizes we have these documents, he might try to stop us. Emma swallowed hard. She had never been this scared before. Her mother gripped the steering wheel tightly as they drove back to Aunt Lisa's house. Emma stared out the window, half expecting Rick to appear at any moment. The entire drive felt tense, but they finally made it back safely. Aunt Lisa greeted them at the door. Did you find out anything? Emma's mother nodded, looking exhausted, more than we ever wanted to know. They sat at the kitchen table and told Aunt Lisa everything. The fake names, the secret bank accounts, and the fact that Rick was running from someone or something. Aunt Lisa shook her head in disbelief. I knew he was a terrible husband, but I never imagined this. Emma bit her lip. What if he comes back? Her mother's eyes darkened. Then we'll be ready. A mysterious call. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Rick. Where was he? Was he watching them? She stared at the ceiling, trying to push the thoughts away. Just as she was about to close her eyes, her mother's phone rang. Emma jumped. It was almost midnight. Who would call this late? Her mother picked up the phone, her voice shaky. Hello. Silence. Then, a deep voice came through the line. You have something that belongs to me. Emma's blood ran cold. It was Rick. Emma's mother froze, the phone trembling in her hand. Emma sat up in bed, her heart racing. She could hear Rick's voice through the speaker, cold and threatening. Give me back my box, or you'll regret it. Emma's mother took a shaky breath. Rick, what have you done? Rick let out a short, bitter laugh. That's none of your business. Just know that I need those papers back, and if you don't give them to me, things will get ugly. Emma's stomach twisted. She had never heard him sound like this before. So desperate, so dangerous. Her mother's voice hardened. I'm not giving you anything. The police have the documents now. Silence. Then Rick spoke again, his voice lower. That was a big mistake. The line went dead. Emma and her mother stared at each other. Aunt Lisa, who had been standing in the doorway, whispered, We need to call the police. Emma's mother nodded and quickly dialed Officer Blake. Within minutes, he was on the way. Emma's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Rick had sounded furious, and if he knew the police had the documents, he might do something reckless. What if he was already on his way here? A night of fear. Officer Blake arrived with 2 more police officers. They searched the house and the yard, making sure Rick wasn't lurking nearby. When they were sure the area was clear, Officer Blake sat down with Emma's mother. Rick is getting desperate, he said. That means we need to be extra careful. Emma swallowed. What do you think he's going to do? Blake sighed. Right now, he's trying to scare you, but if he feels like he has nothing to lose, he might do worse. Aunt Lisa shivered. Should we go to a hotel? Blake shook his head. We'll have an officer park outside all night, and we're increasing the search for Rick. He won't get far. Emma's mother nodded, but she still looked worried. I just want this to be over. Emma felt the same way. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Every little noise outside made her heart jump. She kept expecting Rick to break down the door, to show up in the darkness, demanding his papers back. But nothing happened. The house remained quiet, except for the occasional sweep of headlights as the police car outside patrolled the street. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and Emma drifted into an uneasy sleep, a break in the case. The next morning, the police called with news. We found Rick's car abandoned outside of town. Officer Blake told them over the phone. It looks like he's on foot now. Emma's mother frowned. Do you think he's still nearby? Blake hesitated. It's possible. But the good news is we found something in his car. A second key, similar to the one you found. Emma's heart jumped. Another key. Blake confirmed. Yes, and it led us to a storage unit rented under one of Rick's fake names. We're opening it now. Emma held her breath. What would they find inside? Minutes ticked by as they waited for an update. Finally, Blake called again. His voice was serious. We found more than just money. Emma's mother's hands tightened into fists. What else? Blake's voice dropped. We found evidence of crimes. Real crimes. And now we know exactly what Rick was running from. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever Rick had been hiding, it was bigger than she ever imagined. Emma held her breath as Officer Blake spoke on the phone. His voice was low and serious. We found proof that Rick was involved in a crime ring. He's been helping criminals move stolen money, creating fake identities and hiding evidence. We also found stolen items, jewelry, electronics, and even passports with fake names. Emma's mother gasped. Oh my God, I had no idea. Blake continued, that's not all. There are documents that connect him to a group of dangerous people. That's why he ran. He wasn't just hiding from the police, he was hiding from them. Emma felt her stomach twist. Rick wasn't just a bad man. He was a criminal. Rick's desperate move. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the front door. Everyone froze. Emma's mother's face turned pale. Do you think it's him? Aunt Lisa quickly checked the window. I don't see anyone. Officer Blake spoke quickly. Stay away from the door. We're sending a unit over now. But before they could move, a deep voice came from outside. Open the door. Now. Emma's blood ran cold. It was Rick. Her mother grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her toward the back of the house. We need to hide. Rick pounded on the door again. I know you have my papers. Give them to me, and I'll leave. Emma's hands shook. She could hear the rage in his voice. He wasn't going to leave without a fight. Aunt Lisa whispered, the police are coming. We just have to stay quiet. But then, crash. Rick had kicked open the door. A final confrontation. Rick stormed into the house, his eyes wild. He looked thinner, more desperate than ever before. His clothes were dirty, and his face was covered in sweat. Emma and her mother hid behind the kitchen counter, holding their breath. Aunt Lisa clutched her phone, whispering to the 911 operator. Rick's voice was sharp. Where are you? I just want my papers. Footsteps moved through the house. Closer, closer. Then, sirens. Rick froze. Red and blue lights flashed outside. Drop your weapon and put your hands up, a police officer shouted. Rick spun around, his hands shaking. He looked at the front door, then back at the kitchen, where Emma and her mother were hiding. For a second, it looked like he was going to run toward them. But then, bang! A police officer tackled Rick to the ground. He struggled, shouting, but within seconds, they had him in handcuffs. It was over. The aftermath. Emma sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. The house was full of police officers, asking questions and taking notes. Officer Blake sat down next to her. You're safe now, he said gently. Rick is going to prison for a long time. Emma's mother wiped away tears. I still can't believe it. Blake nodded. People like Rick live double lives. They pretend to be normal, but underneath, they're hiding something dark. Emma swallowed hard. She had always feared Rick, but she had never imagined how dangerous he truly was. Aunt Lisa hugged Emma. You were so brave. Emma took a deep breath. She had been terrified, but she had done the right thing. And now she and her mother were free. A new beginning. A few days later, Emma and her mother packed their bags. They couldn't stay in the same house filled with bad memories. As they loaded the car, Emma asked, "Where are we going?" Her mother smiled. "Somewhere new, somewhere safe." Emma nodded. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope. She had faced her worst fear, and she had won.